So last time I talked about the 7th generation Intel processor line codenamed Kaby Lake, and this week we're going to be talking about the 8th generation Intel line called Coffee Lake. However, before I get into any details, my name is Steve Smith. This is TQA Weekly. This week is going to be pointing out some of the neat parts about this line, the fact that Intel has made it simpler for this line as well, and of course things that still need to be changed, as well as basically what kind of motherboard you need to attach it to, which by the way will be the simplest part of the episode to explain. So let's start off with the i3 processor. The i3 processor in Coffee Lake, and we are talking desktop only, comes in two flavors, both of them being 4 cores, no turbo boost, and no hyperthreading available anymore. And obviously they come in the 3.6 gigahertz model, which is the i3-8100 locked processor, by the way, and the i3-8350K, which is Intel's unlocked i3 processor solution, which comes at 4 gigahertz, which you can unlock. So even for those that actually like light office and like gaming loads, you might actually have an option here for you to overclock with. Which, by the way, might I add that the base price for an i3 is now $117 suggested for the consumer. Then we have the Intel i5 line, which is much different than it used to be before. So while there are still quad cores, those are for mobile only. For the desktop, you have the option between the i5-8400, which is a 2.8 gigahertz with max turbo frequency of 4 gigahertz processor, which is also a 6-core, not a quad-core processor, and you have the i5-8600K, an unlocked processor that goes from 3.6 gigahertz to 4.3 gigahertz because of turbo boost, but you can push it further if you were to overclock this processor. And obviously, that literally means that between the i3 and the i5, all you have to do is decide, do I want it locked or unlocked? So basically comes down to this. The i3 being for those lighter loads, office work like gaming and multimedia, and those for the i5, which is basically most users, which would go into there, especially if you are a gamer or do some sort of 3D rendering or whatever that's not necessarily that intensive. But then again, we also have the i7. So for those that are streamers that have intense 3D rendering, video editing, and those kind of heavier loads that require more power, well, again, it's simple. There are only two choices. The locked version being the i7-8700, which gives you a 3.2 gigahertz to 4.6 gigahertz because of turbo boost, and is also hyper-threaded with 6 native cores, meaning that it's got 12 threads that Windows or any other operating system that you are using is going to be able to take advantage of. And then of course you have the unlocked version being the i7-8700K processor, which goes from 3.7 gigahertz all the way to 4.7 gigahertz on turbo boost alone, which you can overclock, which probably means that you could probably get this to 5 gigahertz if you're using the right kind of cooling, which means that for those out there that are serious about streaming, 3D rendering, editing, or whatever, this is actually a viable option for you. Now, the only thing that is still missing from these Intel lines for the consumer is more PCI Express lanes. You only get 16, which means that if you do anything like two-way SLI, you basically saturated all your PCI Express lanes depending on your motherboard. Which brings me to the simplest part of this episode, the choice of motherboard. So while it uses the 1151 socket, it is only supported by the Z370 platform, which is plenty capable of doing overclocking. But this also means that if you are going for an 8th generation Intel processor, you don't have too far to look. It's a Z370 platform motherboard. So a chipset of Z370 is basically the only thing that a Coffee Lake processor will be supported on. So this is by far the easiest episode. You decide what kind of task you have, light, medium, or heavy loads. Decide whether you want it unlocked or locked, which is basically means you're deciding whether you want one or the other processor, and then just stick it on the same motherboard. And that's it. Like this episode if you like it, dislike it if you didn't, share with those that you think can benefit from this, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions for topics, email me at ask@tqaweekly.com or go to my website, tqaweekly.com. And if you want to make this show better, go to patreon.com/tqaweekly and become a patron today. Patrons get these episodes 24 hours to 48 hours in advance of everyone else. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.